The letter arrived on the same day Staff Sergeant Michael Torres found the boy's body, sitting in his cramped apartment in Riverside, California. Michael stared at the official Army letterhead with trembling hands. The return address read, Defense, Finance and Accounting Service, and the subject line made his blood run cold. Final Benefits Determination, Specialist David Chun. The letter was dated 3 days ago, but David Chun had been declared dead 8 months earlier. Michael had attended the funeral himself. Outside his window, children played in the courtyard of his apartment complex, their laughter echoing off the concrete walls. A young boy ran past with a blue kite trailing behind him, and Michael's chest tightened. For a moment, he was back in Afghanistan, watching another boy with another blue kite. On another day that had changed everything. His phone buzzed. A text from his former squad leader, Sergeant Williams. Did you get the letter? We need to talk. Meet me at the diner on Magnolia at 8 p.m. Come alone. Michael's hands shook as he set the letter down. According to the document, David Chun's death benefits had been processed and distributed to his family. $400,000 in life insurance, plus survivor benefits. But Michael remembered David's last words, whispered in the medical tent before they shipped him home. Tell my parents I'm coming back. Tell them I'm not going to die in this place. David hadn't died in Afghanistan. He'd died in a car accident in Phoenix 6 months after returning home. So why was the Army still processing his combat death benefits? The Magnolia Diner was nearly empty when Michael arrived, its fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows on cracked vinyl booths. Sergeant Williams sat in the back corner, nursing a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. He looked older than his 35 years, his face etched with lines that hadn't been there during their deployment. You look like hell, Torres, Williams said without looking up. Thanks for the pep talk, Sarge. Michael slid into the booth across from him. What's this about? And don't tell me it's a coincidence that we both got letters about Chun. Williams finally met his eyes. How much do you remember about that last week in Kandahar? Before the attack on our base? Michael's jaw tightened. I remember enough. The boy with the blue kite. You remember him? How could he forget? For 3 weeks straight, the same Afghan boy had appeared every morning outside their forward operating base, flying a bright blue kite in the dusty field beyond the perimeter. The kid couldn't have been more than 10 years old, with dark eyes and a smile that somehow survived in a war zone. The soldiers had started looking forward to seeing him, a small reminder that innocence still existed in that hellish place. Of course I remember. He didn't show up that morning, and 6 hours later we got hit. 27 casualties. What does that have to do with Chun's benefits? Williams leaned forward, lowering his voice. What if I told you that attack wasn't random? What if I told you someone knew it was coming? Michael felt ice forming in his stomach. What are you talking about? The boy with the kite, his name was Farid. Intelligence debriefed him after the attack. Turns out he'd been watching our base for weeks, reporting our patrol schedules, garb rotations, everything. His older brother was Taliban. That's impossible. He was just a kid. Kids can be used too, Torres. You know that. Williams pulled out a manila folder and slid it across the table. But here's the thing that'll really mess with your head. Farid told them he stopped coming that morning because someone had paid his family to keep him away. An American. Someone who knew what was going to happen. Michael opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside were photographs, intelligence reports, and what appeared to be financial documents. The photos showed the aftermath of the attack. Twisted metal of their Humvees, the destroyed barracks, the medics working frantically to save lives. 27 casualties, Williams continued. But here's what's interesting. Only 3 were supposed to be fatalities. 3 soldiers who had stumbled onto something they shouldn't have seen. Chun was one of them. David wasn't even in the blast radius. He was in the motor pool when it happened. Exactly. He should have been safe. But somehow, shrapnel from a mortar round traveled 200 yards and found him. Doctors said it was the unluckiest wound they'd ever seen. Michael's head was spinning. Are you saying someone orchestrated the attack to target specific soldiers? Williams reached across and flipped to a page in the folder. It was a bank statement showing wire transfers large amounts moving from overseas accounts to domestic ones. The dates corresponded to the weeks before the attack. I'm saying someone's been playing a very profitable game. Soldiers die, families get benefits, and money changes hands. But sometimes soldiers don't die when they're supposed to, so arrangements have to be made stateside. Michael stared at the bank records, trying to process what he was seeing. You're talking about a conspiracy? To fake soldier deaths for insurance money? Not fake deaths, real deaths, but orchestrated ones. Williams lit a cigarette despite the no-smoking sign. Think about it, Torres. You're running this operation. You need certain soldiers to die, but you can't make it look suspicious. So you arrange an attack, make sure the targets are in the right place at the right time, and collect the benefits afterward. But Chun survived the attack. Yeah. But he also saw something that night that he shouldn't have. Financial records in Lieutenant Morrison's quarters. Copies of death benefit claims for soldiers who were still alive. Chun was smart. He photographed everything before Morrison came back. Michael felt the room spinning. Lieutenant Morrison had been their finance officer, a quiet man from Ohio, who'd always seemed more interested in his paperwork than in the war around him. Morrison's dead. He died in a helicopter crash 2 weeks after we got back stateside. Convenient, right? Except Morrison's family never got his body. Closed casket. Funeral, military honors, the whole 9 yards. But here's the thing. Williams pulled out another document. Morrison's been making withdrawals from a bank account in the Cayman Islands as recently as last month. The implications hit Michael like a physical blow. You're saying Morrison faked his own death? I'm saying Morrison was the inside man. But he wasn't running the show. Someone higher up the chain was calling the shots. Someone with access to deployment schedules, casualty reports, and the ability to manipulate benefit payments. Michael thought about David Chun's funeral, how his parents had wept as they folded the flag, how his little sister had asked, why her? Brother had to die so far from home. If Chun found evidence, why didn't he report it? He tried. But who do you report it to when you don't know how high the corruption goes? Chun was planning to go to the FBI when he got back stateside. He'd hidden copies of everything Morrison had been doing, but someone found out. Williams stubbed it out, his cigarette, and looked directly at Michael. Chun's car accident? The brake lines had been cut. Professional job. Made to look like mechanical failure. The diner suddenly felt suffocating. Michael needed air, needed space to think. But Williams grabbed his wrist as he started to stand. There's more. The letter you got today, it's not a mistake. Someone's testing the system, seeing if anyone notices when dead soldiers get multiple benefit payments. They're getting bolder. How do you know all this? Williams smiled grimly. Because I've been investigating it for 8 months, ever since I got my own letter. Apparently, I died in a training accident at Fort Bragg 3 weeks ago. Funny thing is, I was in Detroit visiting my mom that whole week. Michael sank back into the booth. How many soldiers? We've identified at least 30 cases over the past 5 years. Soldiers who died twice, once overseas, once stateside. Families getting duplicate payments, sometimes years apart. The paperwork gets lost in the bureaucracy, and by the time anyone notices, the money's long gone. Who's behind it? That's what we need to find out. But I think we're getting close. The letter you got today, it's connected to a payment that was supposed to go to someone else. Someone who's been collecting death benefits for soldiers they helped eliminate. Williams leaned forward, his voice urgent. I need your help, Torres. You were there that day with the Kite. You saw how everything went down, and you knew Chun better than anyone. If he left evidence behind, you might be the only one who can find it. 3 days later, Michael stood outside David Chun's parents' house in Phoenix, holding a bouquet of flowers and rehearsing the lie he was about to tell. The modest 2-story home sat in a quiet neighborhood where American flags hung from front porches and children rode bicycles on sidewalks that actually felt safe. Mrs. Chun answered the door, her face lighting up with recognition before quickly clouding with concern. Michael, what a surprise. Is everything okay? I was in town for work and wanted to pay my respects, he said, offering the flowers. I hope you don't mind the unexpected visit. She invited him in for tea, and they sat in the living room surrounded by photographs of David High School graduation, basic training, family vacations. Michael noticed that all the military photos had been taken down since the funeral. We're still adjusting, Mrs. Chun said, following his gaze. Some days I forget he's gone, and I catch myself setting a place for him at dinner. Michael's throat tightened. Mrs. Chun, I need to ask you something, and I hope you won't think I'm being insensitive. Did David ever send anything home? Papers, documents, maybe a flash drive or computer files? Her expression grew puzzled. Well, yes. A few weeks before the accident, he mailed us a package. Said it was important and that we should keep it safe. But he also said not to open it unless something happened to him. Michael's heart raced. Did you open it? After the funeral, yes. But it was just computer disks and papers covered in numbers. We didn't understand any of it. She paused. Why do you ask? David mentioned it to me before he came home. He said he'd found something important that might help other soldiers. I think he wanted me to follow up on it. Mrs. Chun disappeared upstairs and returned with a shoebox. Inside were 3 flash drives, dozens of printed bank statements, and what appeared to be military personnel files for soldiers. Michael didn't recognize Dot as he flipped through the documents. A pattern emerged. Each file contained information about a soldier's deployment, their family situation, their life insurance beneficiaries, and the circumstances of their death. But there were discrepancies, dates that didn't match, locations that seemed wrong. Death certificates that had been issued twice. One file made his blood run cold. It contained his own personnel information, along with a detailed psychological profile and an assessment of his value potential. A handwritten note in the margin. Read, suitable candidate, family situation ideal, financial desperation evident. Mrs. Chun, he said carefully, have you received any other benefits since David's funeral? Any additional payments or insurance settlements? She looked confused. Actually, yes. Last month we got another check from the Army. They said there had been an error in the original payment calculation. An additional $50,000. Her expression grew worried. Is there something wrong? Do we need to give it back? Michael felt sick. David's death was being used to test the system, to see if multiple payments would be noticed. Someone was still actively running the operation. His phone buzzed with a text from Williams. Check. The news. Morrison's body was found in a hotel room in Miami this morning. Apparent heart attack. Michael excused himself and stepped outside to call Williams. Morrison's really dead this time? Looks like it. But here's the interesting part. Hotel records show he'd been living there under a false name for the past 6 months, and he wasn't alone. Hotel staff reported seeing him with a woman. Middle-aged, well-dressed, spoke with authority. Sounded military. Any idea who? Working on it. But Torres, we might be running out of time. If Morrison's dead, it means someone's cleaning house. Anyone who knows about the operation is now a liability. That night, Michael spread David's files across his kitchen table, looking for patterns, connections, anything that might point to the person at the top of the conspiracy. The documents painted a picture of systematic fraud spanning multiple military installations and involving dozens of soldiers. But one document stood out, a personnel evaluation form with an unusual signature. The handwriting was distinctive, with a characteristic loop in the letter R that Michael recognized. He'd seen it hundreds of times on deployment orders, casualty reports, and commendation forms. Colonel Rebecca Nash, their former commanding officer. Michael's hands shook as he reached for his phone. Colonel Nash had been the one who'd recommended him for early discharge after the attack. She'd personally signed his medical evaluation, his psychological assessment, and his discharge papers. She'd also been the one who'd assured him that David would receive the best possible care after his injury. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Torres, this is unexpected. How are you adjusting to civilian life?" "Colonel Nash, I need to ask you about something." "About David Chun's death benefits." There was a long pause. "I'm not sure what you mean, Sergeant." "Chun's benefits were processed according to standard protocol." "Which time? The first time when he supposedly died in Afghanistan, or the second time after his car accident?" Another pause, longer this time. "I think there may be some confusion, Torres. Perhaps we should meet in person to discuss this. Are you still in California?" Michael's blood ran cold. He'd never told her where he lived after discharge. "How did you know I was in California?" "Your address is in your file, of course. Listen, why don't you come to my office tomorrow? We can clear up any misunderstandings." "I don't think that's a good idea, Colonel." Her voice changed, becoming harder, more authoritative. "Sergeant Torres, you're clearly struggling with some post-deployment issues. Paranoid thinking, conspiracy theories, these are common symptoms of PTSD. I'm ordering you to report for psychological evaluation tomorrow at 0800 hours. I'm not active duty anymore. You can't order me to do anything. Can't I?" There was something almost amused in her voice now. "You might be surprised what I can do, Torres. You might be surprised what I've already done." The line went dead. Michael immediately called Williams, but the phone went straight to voicemail. He tried 3 more times with the same result. Something was wrong. He threw David's files into a backpack and headed for his car. Whatever was happening, he couldn't stay in his apartment. As he reached for the door handle, he noticed a black sedan parked across the street. 2 figures sat in the front seats, and one of them was talking on a phone. Michael ducked back inside and went to his bedroom window. The sedan was still there. As he watched, a second car pulled up behind it. Then a third. His phone rang. Colonel Nash's voice was cold and professional. "Sergeant Torres, you have something that doesn't belong to you. We can do this the easy way or the hard way." "What happened to Williams?" "Sergeant Williams suffered a tragic accident this evening. Apparently, he'd been drinking and lost control of his vehicle. Very sad. These veteran suicides are becoming an epidemic." Michael's heart pounded. "Williams didn't drink." "Didn't he?" "I think you'll find that his medical records show a long history of alcohol abuse and depression. Sometimes the paperwork is more reliable than memory, don't you think?" Through his window, Michael saw the men getting out of the cars. They were dressed in civilian clothes, but they moved with military precision. "You killed him. I saved him from a very unpleasant alternative. The same offer is available to you, Torres. Return the files, and we can arrange a peaceful resolution. A nice, quiet heart attack. Very dignified. Your family will get full benefits." Michael grabbed his backpack and headed for the back door. Why, Colonel? Why kill your own soldiers? Do you have any idea how much money the military wastes, Torres? Billions of dollars in benefits paid to families who contribute nothing to society. Death benefits for soldiers who are going to die anyway. At least this way, the money goes to people who can use it properly. To line your own pockets. To fund operations that actually matter. Black sites that Congress won't approve. Weapons. Systems that bleeding hearts would never support. Sometimes the greater good requires creative financing. Michael slipped out his back door into the alley behind his apartment building. He could hear voices coming from the front of the building. "Now, the boy with the blue kite," he said into the phone. "You knew about the attack in advance." "Of course I knew. I planned it. But it was never supposed to be about Shun. He was just collateral damage. The real target was Lieutenant Morrison. He was getting nervous, asking too many questions. The attack was meant to silence him permanently. But Morrison survived. Morrison was compromised. He'd started skimming money for himself instead of following orders. So we staged his death and let him think he was free. Amazing how greed makes people careless. Michael reached his car and quietly opened the door. And then you had him eliminated. When he became a liability, Morrison served his purpose. Just like you're going to serve yours, Torres. The only question is whether you die as a hero or as a traitor. Michael started his engine and pulled out of the alley. In his rearview mirror, he could see the men discovering his empty apartment. "I'm going to the FBI, Colonel. I'm going to tell them everything." She laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "With what evidence? Files that could easily be fabricated? The testimony of a psychologically unstable veteran with PTSD? Even if they believe you, I have friends in very high places. This operation has been protecting national security for years." Michael's phone buzzed with an incoming text. It was a photo of his sister Maria and her 2 children, taken that afternoon at a playground in San Diego. The message read, "Beautiful family. Would hate for anything to happen to them. You leave my family out of this. That's entirely up to you, Torres. Return the files, report for psychological evaluation, and have a nice, quiet breakdown. Your family stays safe, and you get to be remembered as a hero who couldn't handle the transition to civilian life." Michael disconnected the call and threw the phone out the window. He needed to get to the FBI field office in Los Angeles, but first he had to make sure his family was safe. He pulled over at a gas station and used a payphone to call his sister. "Maria, listen to me carefully. You need to take the kids and go to Mom's house right now. Don't ask questions, just go. And don't use your credit cards or phones." "Michael, what's going on?" "You're scaring me. Someone's trying to hurt our family. Because of something I found out. Just trust me and go to Mom's. I'll explain everything later." He hung up and got back in his car. The FBI office was an hour away, but he needed to make one more stop first. David Chung's grave. The cemetery was dark and empty when Michael arrived. He found David's headstone and knelt beside it, pulling out the flash drives. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you, brother," he whispered. "But I'm going to make this right." As he stood to leave, he heard footsteps behind him. Colonel Nash emerged from the shadows, flanked by 2 men in dark suits. "You always were too sentimental, Torres. That's what made you such a good soldier. And such a poor conspirator." Michael backed away, clutching the evidence. "How did you find me?" "The same way I've been tracking you all evening. The GPS in your car is military issue. Did you really think we couldn't monitor it?" She gestured to her companions. "These gentlemen are from a private security firm. Very discreet, very efficient. They specialize in veterans who've had unfortunate accidents. People will ask questions if I disappear." "Will they?" A troubled veteran with PTSD, struggling with survivor's guilt, unable to hold down a job? The suicide rate among returning soldiers is tragically high. No one will be surprised. One of the men pulled out a pistol with a silencer attached. "Make it quick," Colonel Nash said. "We have other business to attend to tonight." But as the man raised the weapon, a new voice cut through the darkness. "Federal agents, drop your weapons." Floodlights suddenly blazed from multiple directions, and FBI agents in tactical gear emerged from behind headstones. Colonel Nash spun around, her face a mask of shock and fury. Williams stepped out from behind a large monument, very much alive, speaking into a radio. "We got it all. Every word." Michael stared at him in disbelief. "But your car accident, staged. We've been working with the FBI for months, building a case. But we needed her to admit everything on record." Williams held up a small recording device. "Your phone call was being monitored and recorded from the moment you answered." Colonel Nash looked between them, her composure finally cracking. "This is treason. You're interfering with classified military operations. The only thing classified here is your bank account in Switzerland," an FBI agent said, stepping forward. "With handcuffs. Colonel Rebecca Nash, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and the murders of 17 American service members." As they led her away, she turned back to Michael one final time. "You have no idea what you've done. The operations I was funding, they're protecting this country from threats you can't even imagine." "Maybe," Michael said quietly, "but not by sacrificing the soldiers who swore to serve it." 2 months later, Michael sat in a congressional hearing room, testifying before the House Armed Services Committee. The scandal had exploded across every major news network. Decorated colonel using orchestrated attacks and arranged accidents to eliminate soldiers who had discovered her embezzlement scheme. But as Michael answered questions about David Chun, about the boy with the blue kite, about the attack that had claimed so many of his brothers, he realized that the real truth was simpler and more devastating than any conspiracy. Colonel Nash had been telling the truth about one thing she wasn't: the mastermind. The investigation had uncovered a network of officers across multiple branches, all participating in a system that treated soldier deaths as financial opportunities. The money hadn't been funding black operations or secret weapons programs. It had been funding their retirements. The boy with the blue kite hadn't been a Taliban spy. He'd been exactly what he appeared to be: a child playing in a field, unaware that his simple routine had become a comfort to soldiers far from home. His absence that morning had been coincidental, nothing more than a family moving to escape the violence that had consumed their region. The attack on their base had been real, but it hadn't been orchestrated by Colonel Nash. It had been a legitimate Taliban assault that she had simply used as an opportunity to eliminate soldiers who threatened her operation. David Chun had been wounded by chance, but his death 8 months later had been carefully planned. The most chilling discovery came in the final days of the investigation. The scheme had been running for nearly a decade, with hundreds of soldiers dying under suspicious circumstances. Each death had been investigated and classified as either combat losses or tragic accidents. The system had been designed to ensure that questions were never asked, that patterns were never recognized. Michael thought about all the families who had grieved for their children, believing they had died serving their country with honor. The truth was that they had died serving the greed of their commanding officers. As he finished his testimony and stepped down from the witness chair, Michael caught sight of Mrs. Chun in the gallery. She had flown in from Phoenix to hear the truth about her son's death. Their eyes met, and she nodded slightly, not forgiveness, because there was nothing to forgive, but acknowledgement that David's sacrifice had finally exposed a cancer that had been eating away at the military from within. Outside the hearing room, Williams was waiting with a cup of coffee and a wry smile. "How does it feel to be a hero, Torres?" I'm not a hero. I'm just a soldier who finally did his job. Which was? Michael looked back at the hearing room, where families of the victims were beginning to file out. Protecting the people who couldn't protect themselves. They walked out of the building together, into a Washington, D.C. morning that felt cleaner somehow, as if a weight had been lifted from the air itself. But Michael knew that the real work was just beginning. There would be more hearings, more investigations, more families learning terrible truths about how their loved ones had really died. The boy with the blue kite would never fly it again. But somewhere, in another field in another country, another child was probably playing while soldiers watched and took comfort in the simple reminder that innocence could survive even in the darkest places. That was the truth Michael would carry. Forward not the conspiracy or the corruption, but the memory of how a child's joy had given meaning to men who are far from home, and how that meaning had ultimately led to justice for those who could no longer seek it for themselves.